Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, just to do a follow-up on that question, is Turkey going to back off on this venture? I mean, we are expressing our concern, but so far they have not seemed very amenable to respond to our concerns, not only on this issue, but in other areas.
To be quite candid, Senator, I couldn't give you the assurance that they are going to.
Thank you. Deputy Assistant Secretary Stuhl, last August you were before this committee and you gave a very thorough whole-of-government approach toward addressing ISIS fighters, just as you did this morning with Senator Risch when he raised concerns about the ISIS detainees. Unfortunately, the situation has gotten worse since that time, not better. And we have passed legislation to create an ISIS detainee coordinator who right now, as I understand, is dual-hatted to look at counterterrorism as well as ISIS detainees. I think that's probably not the best way to get something done in that area. So can you talk about what we need to do to actually have a functioning detainee coordinator who can do the kinds of things that you've laid out so eloquently with Senator Risch that need to be done to address this problem?
Thank you for that question, Senator. On the specific question of identifying one coordinator, I am going to defer to Assistant Secretary Leaf on how she intends to address that now that she is in her position.
Great.
But I will just say from a DoD perspective, within the authorities and resources we have, number one is what we can do in the near to medium term, which is support the SDF in ensuring that these facilities where ISIS fighters are housed, detainees, are more secure and more humane. And then at the Al-Hol and Al-Raj displaced persons camps, again, it is not a military mission. Those are humanitarian camps. But what we can do is support the SDF by giving them the tools and the training for addressing the security and humanitarian needs of that unique population set as well. And then third, of course, is engaging constantly with the SDF about ensuring that humanitarian NGO and UN access to these populations.
I don't want to cut you off, but let
No
me
problem.
ask Assistant Secretary Leaf then to respond, please.
Senator, I've had several discussions about Al-Hol in particular with the CENTCOM Commander, General Kurilla, and he and I are going to work together on the set of issues around Al-Hol. I hope to make an early trip to Iraq, for one, and engage with the government, since so many of the women and children in that camp, and also, of course, the fighters in Hasaka, are of Iraqi origin. I'm going to also obviously work very closely with CT on this issue because it does really require, beyond the de-ISIS coalition's efforts to secure the camp, to ensure constant humanitarian support to the residents of the camp. Ultimately, we have got to get the camp down. And I've seen the numbers over the last couple of years go from 73, 60,000. They're now actually, I think, around 56,000. We've just got to be relentless on this effort, and I do plan to work to that effect with CT.
And so, do you expect to have an ISIS detainee coordinator who will be functioning in that capacity?
Honestly, Senator, I don't know. I'll take your question back, and I will come back to you on that.
So even though we passed legislation that says that needs to happen, that hasn't happened yet?
It has not happened yet. As you said, it is, the CT Bureau is double-hatted, but I will take your question back.
Well, Mr. Chairman, clearly I think we need to pass legislation. If we're really going to see something done in this area and be serious about it, then we have to have somebody who's in charge of that. And while I understand that CT is still a problem, when other Middle Eastern leaders are coming to members of this committee and saying, this is a problem that has to be addressed and we can't do it by ourselves, then we need to figure out how to get this done. And so far, we're not making much progress. So I have one final question, and that is Secretary Menendez talked about Captagon in his opening remarks, and we're seeing more and more that the availability of Captagon is not only helping to fund the Assad regime, but it's also creating an even more destabilizing synthetic drug trade. We're already dealing in the United States with fentanyl. I've seen that very directly in my home state of New Hampshire, so I know the potential problems from the synthetic drug trade. So what can we do to help address that? And are you confident that the Lebanese armed forces can help control that trade that's coming across the border with Lebanon?
Senator, I think the dimensions of the trade, the production and the trafficking, which, by the way, yes, as you said, this is something that is associated with members of the Assad family, the regime, ISIS, you name it, criminal and terrorist elements from Lebanon to Syria are involved in that. So I do think it is an effort that goes well beyond the limits of one actor, however much they may attempt to deal with it. We've had discussions with the Jordanians, Saudis, others who are deeply concerned about the spreading the toxic nature of this trade and what it is doing to their society. So I will make it part of my mission to work this with all of these governments. We do, in fact, have a number of U.S. agencies who are already engaged with regional partners in information sharing, coordinating operations and targeting of financial and trafficking networks. And we just really need to enhance those efforts.
Thank you. Well, it's another reason why we need to ensure that the Lebanese Armed Forces continues to function. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just a personal word, congratulations